During that dinner, when the scraping of forks against porcelain plates grated sharply in the cramped kitchen, my grandfather looked up, staring straight at me through the steam rising from the pot of stew. His voice was still as gentle as ever, but the question hit the table like a stone thrown dead center. He said, Connor, that car I gave you last year, is it running all right? Any trouble with it?" I was still bent over cutting a piece of potato, thinking I'd misheard. It took a few seconds to react. I looked up, heart skipping a beat, eyes darting from him to my parents. "What car, Grandpa?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're talking about what car exactly?" The whole kitchen went dead silent. My father, Patrick Walsh, froze with his water glass halfway to his mouth. His fingers tightened until the knuckles went white, then he set the glass down a little too hard. Glass clacking against wood with a dry, hollow sound. My mother, Denise, her face stiffened, as if someone had just ripped off the mask she'd worn for years. The everyday smile vanished in an instant. My grandfather, Edward Walsh, looked at me for a long time. His old eyes were still clear. He lightly furrowed his nearly white eyebrows. "Connor, you never got the blue sedan I told your parents to buy for you? The one I specifically said, this money is for Connor so he doesn't have to struggle so much getting to work?" My throat went dry. Each word had to be forced out. "I've never seen any car, Grandpa. No keys, no paperwork, not even a single mention." In those few short seconds of that dinner, everything was suddenly lit by a harsh light I could no longer hide from. My name is Connor Walsh, 23 years old, and if I'm being honest, ever since I was old enough to understand anything, I've always felt like a stranger in my own home. This isn't some dramatic story filled with belts and screaming that echoes through the walls. There are no visible bruises to photograph and post online as proof. It's actually much harder to see. This is the story of a family that looks perfectly normal, perfectly fine to the neighbors. One that at some point quietly sat down together and decided, without ever saying it out loud, that their firstborn son simply wasn't worth pouring much love into. My parents, Patrick and Denise, never put it into words, but they made it very clear who in this house was chosen to be loved. My younger sister, Megan, 2 years younger than me, is the official princess of the Walsh family. She's the one who always got the prettiest Christmas presents, the most expensive toys wrapped in shiny paper, the first to try any new gadget that came into the house. She wore designer clothes, limited edition sneakers, got taken to salons just because she felt like a little change for fun. Every time Megan brought home a report card full of C's and a few scattered B's, my mother would hug her, voice overflowing. With pride, "My girl tried so hard. That's already amazing. Grades don't matter as much as your happiness." Dad would stand beside her, ruffling her hair. "This kid's got something special. As long as she's happy at school, that's enough. No need to stress." Meanwhile, I could bring home a first-place certificate from the state math competition, plaster my report card with A's, and the only reaction I'd get was a curt, "Yeah, good. If you work hard, that's what you should get. But don't get cocky. There are plenty of kids out there better than you." I grew up in an atmosphere where all the warmth flowed in one direction, and on the other side, where I stood, there were only turned backs. Whenever I awkwardly tried to be close to Megan, patting her shoulder or giving her a hug after she cried because her best friend trashed her on social media, Mom would stand in the doorway, lips curled in a smile, but her eyes only lingered on Megan's flushed face. "Look at Megan, so sensitive, always knowing how to love everyone." And there I was, standing right there, like a coat rack someone had forcibly shoved into the frame. The times I tried cracking a joke at dinner, retelling something funny a coworker said, Dad would wait until I finished, then turn to Megan and laugh loudly. "This girl, soon as she opens her mouth, the whole room lights up. So much energy." My story just slid away like it had never existed. I slowly realized that in their eyes, I was like the failed rough draft of the child they wished they'd had. A version of their own kid, but the wrong color, the wrong size. I graduated high school with a 9.2 average, got acceptance letters from 3 different universities that arrived the same week, had my name announced over the loudspeaker at the graduation ceremony. Yet that evening, in the Walsh living room, The only sound came from the TV, replaying some game show. I stood in the middle of the room, envelopes in hand, trying to hold in my excitement. "Mom, I got in, all three!" My words just hung loosely in the air. Mom didn't even turn around, eyes glued to the screen, pretending to think very practically. "College is really expensive, Connor, and we still have to plan for when Megan goes to university. Your sister has such a bright future. We need to prepare for her." Dad nodded, like that was the most obvious truth in the world. For one brief moment, it felt like someone had quietly blown out the candle I'd just lit inside myself. At 18, while Megan got a brand new laptop to prepare for college entrance exams, I filled out a job application at an electronics store in the city mall. It wasn't the future I'd imagined for myself when I was solving math problems so hard the teacher frowned, but it was enough to pay for gas, food, chip in a bit toward household bills, and not have to hold my hand out to them. I stocked speakers and game consoles on shelves, smiled at strangers, answered questions they could have Googled in 10 seconds, and occasionally closed a big sale for a little extra commission. On weekends, the mall was packed. Voices, advertisement music, crying kids, all mixed into one chaotic noise. I'd leave the store after dark, legs throbbing like someone had poured lead into them, hands rough and dry from handling plastic cases and cables all day, air conditioning blasting straight onto my skin. Yet strangely, every time I opened my wallet at the gas station and saw the bills I'd earned myself, I still felt a quiet pride. I was building my own life, no matter how small, without anyone propping me up. Meanwhile, Megan floated through life like a modern-day princess. At 20, she had never set foot in any workplace as an employee. She slept in, went to the gym in the afternoon, took photos at new brunch places in the evening with her friends. Always had money for extra dishes, for online orders, for bringing home another handbag or pair of sneakers that cost 2 weeks of my salary. My parents explained it to me like I was the one who didn't get it. "She's preparing for the job market. You have to invest in appearance, in image. She's still young, no need to worry about hard stuff like earning money yet." I didn't argue. I just quietly looked at the numbers I knew from the salary figures Dad sometimes grumbled about, added the random tutoring money Mom made, and did the math in my head. No matter how much I stretched it, bent the budget every which way, I still couldn't understand how that kind of income could possibly support the lifestyle they were funding for Megan. The answer finally came when I was 19. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Grandpa Ed. Just seeing that name made the whole workday feel half as heavy. Edward Walsh had always been the odd one outside in the family frequency. When I was little, he'd drive me 15 minutes to the riverbank, teach me how to watch a fishing float without twitching, show me how to patch a bike tire in his old garage that always smelled of oil and had a crackling radio playing country songs. Whenever I talked about dreams, going to college, doing something different from the life everyone around me seemed stuck in, he listened all the way to the end. No mocking, no calling it unrealistic. "Connor, you stubborn little rascal," his voice came through the phone that day. "I'm moving to Portugal." I stopped dead in the middle of the sidewalk. "Portugal? Like, moving there for good?" "Yeah," he said. "Got a decent job offer over there, even for an old man like me. And after your grandma passed 2 years ago, nothing's really keeping me here anymore. New scenery. Might add a few extra years to this old body." My chest tightened. I understood. The house had felt hollow since Grandma died, but hearing he was actually leaving so far away felt like someone squeezing my heart. "Don't worry," he added quickly, reading my silence. "I'll still take care of the family from afar. Every month I'll send money to your parents, and I want to set aside a specific part just for you, so you can study, so you can choose the path you actually deserve. You're smart, Connor. It'd be a damn shame to keep burying yourself in retail shifts." After he moved, things at home changed noticeably. Dad complained less about utility bills. The usual "money's tight this month" disappeared. Megan started showing up in even pricier outfits, logos flashing on shirts and bags. The kitchen got renovated, new stone countertops, new cabinets, fancy coffee machine. When I asked, Mom just said lightly, "Grandpa Edward sends a monthly amount to help with household expenses. It really takes the pressure off so you don't have to worry." I nodded like I understood. I already had a job, paid my own way, and didn't want to be the guy indirectly begging for Grandpa's money. But every time I remembered that phone call, how he specifically said, "So you can study," a tiny stubborn question stuck in my mind like a thorn. If the money was meant for my education, then where exactly was my part? Contact with him grew rarer. Time zones, his new job, my schedule, everything collided. We only managed a video call every few months. He always started the same way. "Connor, how are you? Taking any classes? Need anything from Grandpa?" And I always gave the same safe answer. "I'm fine, Grandpa. Still working, handling things myself, don't want to be a burden." There'd be a few seconds of silence on the other end, then a very soft sigh. "You're always like that," he'd say, then add, "You've always been special, Connor. You've got a good heart and a determination most people never get. Don't let anyone, even family, make you believe you're worthless." To a lot of people, those words would just be encouragement. To me, they were the only safety line keeping me tied to myself. On days I dragged myself home after long shifts, ears still ringing with coworkers' jokes, only to hear Mom toss out a casual comment about my dead-end job or Dad grumble that his son lacked ambition, I'd shut myself in my room, lie on the old bed, replay Grandpa's voice in my head. "At least one person believes I'm not useless." And only then could I fall asleep. My 23rd birthday fell on a Sunday. I worked the morning shift and got home at dusk. I stepped into the kitchen and froze. There was a small, store-bought cake on the table, cheap supermarket kind with glossy white frosting, artificial colors, "Happy Birthday, Connor," written slightly crooked, fadet, a plastic knife and some paper plates beside it. Mom poked her head out from the living room. "Oh, you're back. Come blow out the candles." There were no candles. Dad leaned against the counter, Megan scrolled on her phone, glanced up with a half smile, and the three of them started singing "Happy Birthday." Perfect rhythm, full lyrics, but the tone sounded like they were checking the last box on a to-do list. When they finished, Megan shrugged. "Frosting's kind of sweet, but whatever. Grandpa said we had to get one." I looked up. "Grandpa said?" Mom nodded. "Edward called from Portugal, said we better not forget your birthday, even sent extra money specifically for the cake." I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. All year, no one in the house had mentioned my birthday. Without that call from halfway around the world, today would have just been another Sunday. We ate the cake in silence, plastic knives scraping against paper plates. Nobody asked what I wished for. Nobody mentioned what my new year might look like. When we were done, everyone went back to their rooms. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty cake box, telling myself, at least someone remembered. But in the weeks after that birthday, I started noticing things were slightly off. My parents began showing off more. Mom came home with a leather wallet I'd seen in a mall window, price tag equal to a full month's salary for me, if not more. Dad wore a new watch, the kind he used to stand far away from and mutter was too extravagant. Megan basically turned the house into her personal dressing room. New clothes, new shoes, new perfume, all carrying brand names I only dared whisper in my head. One day, passing the living room, I heard Mom on the phone, voice excited. "Just the three of us. A little beach getaway, 5-star resort, ocean view room, everything's booked." I stood in the kitchen, dish towel still in hand, and the phrase, "just the three of us," stabbed my ears like a needle. When the trip was officially announced, there was nothing left to discuss. The rooms were booked for 3 people. Dad said, "Besides, you have work. It's not easy to get time off, right? Your customers are important." He said it like he was looking out for my career, but inside my head, only one question kept repeating: where is all this money coming from? For a whole week, I opened and closed the store, counted registers, turned off lights, locked doors, then opened my phone to Instagram, flooded with their photos. Mom with colorful cocktails by the pool, Megan spinning and laughing in front of turquoise water, Dad photographing beautifully plated food, captions always family time, grateful, blessed. I sat in my tiny room eating instant noodles, listening to the heater clunk, throat so bitter plain water couldn't wash it away. I told myself maybe Grandpa landed a really good job in Portugal. Maybe he got some inheritance. Maybe he willingly took care of the family like he promised. I tried not to dig deeper because I knew the deeper I dug, the more painful the answers that flashed up would be. But curiosity and the gut feeling that something was wrong kept crawling around my brain like a small insect that refused to stay still. Another year dragged by, heavy and repetitive until I knew its rhythm by heart. Work, home, work, home. Occasionally I'd grab a beer with coworkers after shift, talk about games or annoying customers. Then everyone went their separate ways. I didn't have money for luxuries like concerts, trips, or big nights out like my own family seemed to, and slowly I got used to walking into that house more like a boarder than a member. Megan kept living like royalty, no job, no rent worries. My parents still looked at me like my existence was an expense they never wanted but had to tolerate. I just kept pushing. One more certificate, one more shift, one more small savings deposit, as if someday someone would notice. No one ever turned around. As my 24th birthday approached, I no longer expected anything. No cake, no song, no happy birthday, no what do you want this year. I told myself it would just be another regular day, another shift on the schedule, another night, walking through the Walsh front door. Little did I know that this seemingly bland 24th year, combined with one innocent question from Grandpa at what seemed like an ordinary dinner, would be the starting point for the entire carefully constructed family script to crack, piece by piece. To be completely honest, I had already braced myself for another birthday just like the last one. Maybe a cheap supermarket cake grabbed at the last minute, or worse, nothing but a half-hearted, "Oh, it's your birthday today?" tossed out like an afterthought. I'd trained myself to keep expectations low so it wouldn't hurt as much. 3 days before the big day, I was restocking headphones on the shelf when my phone buzzed. The screen read Grandpa Ed. My heart actually skipped a beat. It had been ages since he last called. I answered quickly, still tasting plastic and cold air conditioning in my throat. "Connor, my boy, how have you been?" Grandpa Edward's voice came through, warm and low, exactly like those afternoons I spent sitting in his garage listening to the radio when I was little. I almost laughed from sheer surprise. "Grandpa, I'm good. Still working regular shifts, trying to live decently." "Good, that's real good," he chuckled. I heard the scrape of a chair and the clink of a glass being set down somewhere on his end. "Listen, I've got news I wanted to tell you myself. Next week I'm flying back to the States. I want to be there, with you, on your actual birthday." My heart started pounding, like someone had punched it. 3 years, 3 whole years since I'd seen him. Just rushed calls, time zone mishaps, never a full conversation. And now he was coming back? For me. "We're having dinner at the best restaurant in town," he went on, excitement clear in his voice. "I already booked the table. Make sure you invite your mom and dad and Megan, okay? This is going to be a real family celebration." I hung up, and my mouth still wouldn't relax into a normal position. It felt like someone had finally reached over and flipped on the light in a room I'd been locked in for years. For the first time in forever, I was genuinely looking forward to something. I started picturing seeing him again, his old cologne, that big laugh, the familiar pat on the back he always gave when he said, "Kid, you're capable of more than you think." But when I told the family that Grandpa Edward was coming back and wanted to treat everyone to dinner, the mood shifted into something completely different. Dad was flipping through the newspaper, Mom was wiping the table, Megan was sprawled on the couch scrolling. "Grandpa's coming home," I said, unable to hide my excitement. "Next week, on my birthday. He booked a table at the nicest place in town and wants all of us to come." Patrick and Denise exchanged a quick, heavy glance. Almost at the same moment, both of their faces tightened. Megan, who's usually loud, suddenly went quiet. Her eyes stayed on the screen, but her thumb stopped moving. "That's nice," Mom spoke first, forcing a stiff smile. "It'll be wonderful to see Edward again." It sounded like a compliment, but her tone was strange, strained, like she was calculating something. Dad just grunted. Megan let out a tiny, "yeah," that was quieter than her phone notifications. I didn't get it. This was the same Edward who'd kept the household from drowning in bills, the one who sent money every single month. If this were me, I'd be thrilled to see him. Why did they look like they'd just been served court papers? I told myself to let it go. I wasn't about to ruin my rare excitement by overanalyzing their faces. I had way too much to look forward to. The day finally arrived. Late afternoon, sunlight was slicing through the front curtains when there was a rapid knock. I ran to the door, heart racing like when I was a kid, and he showed up with a box of donuts. Grandpa Edward stood on the porch, one suitcase in hand, wearing the same old jacket I remembered from the photos he'd sent. He was thinner, cheekbones sharper, hair almost completely white now, but the smile was exactly the same. Big, loud, warm. "Connor, my boy." He opened his arms and pulled me into a tight hug. The smell of his aftershave mixed with a faint trace of cigarette brought my whole childhood rushing back. "Look at you. You're a grown man now." I hugged him harder than I meant to. Something warm and painful ran down my spine, the feeling of finally being held like you actually matter after years of the opposite. Mom and Dad came up behind me. They smiled, but the smiles didn't reach their eyes. Megan lingered in the back, phone still in hand, gave a quick wave, then looked down again. Nobody rushed forward for the big family reunion hug you see in commercials. "All right, everybody." Grandpa clapped twice, single-handedly stretching the atmosphere back into the shape. "Today's a special day. I booked us at Terrasso Duval." My eyes went wide. Terrasso Duval was the place I only ever let myself glance at while walking past, where a lunch cost more than half my shift's pay. On the drive over, Grandpa sat up front next to Dad. Megan and I were in the back. He kept twisting around, asking me everything. "How's the store job going, kid? You happy there? Got any plans for the next few years? Still thinking about going back to school?" For the first time in years, someone was asking about my future and actually wanted to hear the answer, not just asking to fill silence and then erase whatever I said. I told him about the shifts, how I was saving for an online course, how someday I wanted to leave this town that had started feeling too small. He nodded, put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Connor," he said slowly. "Working since you were 18, supporting yourself, no handouts, still keeping your head straight. Not everybody can do that." From the back seat, Megan muttered, "Boyd," loud enough for the whole car. "Working full-time at the mall is nothing to be proud of," in her usual bored rich girl tone. Dad let out a little laugh like it was a joke. Mom sighed the sigh of someone embarrassed that her son won't try harder. I sat quietly, fingers digging into the seatbelt, but Grandpa turned around and looked straight through the gap between the front seats. His eyes weren't just warm anymore, there was steel in them, the same look he used to get when he talked about working 3 jobs to build his company. The restaurant was beyond anything I'd imagined. From the entrance, the smell of sauces, wine, and hot butter hit you full force. Servers in crisp white shirts, black ties, shoes polished mud to a mirror shine. Tables covered in perfect white linen. Crystal glasses catching candlelight. The gentle clink of silverware on porcelain, soft jazz, just loud enough to notice. I looked down at my clearance rack button-up and faded jeans and felt like I'd wandered onto someone else's movie set. Grandpa leaned over and whispered, "You look perfect, Connor. Real class isn't the shirt. It's how you sit down and hold your head up." Dinner felt like stepping through a portal into another world. Every plate that came out was art. Meat sliced perfectly even, sauces drizzled just right, vegetables arranged like a painting. He ordered expensive wine I'd only ever seen in ads, and every time we raised our glasses, he turned to me first and clinked mine. "To Connor," he said, "to the young man who stands on his own 2 feet." For the first time in my life, I felt like the actual center of an evening instead of the smudge at the edge of the frame. But the longer it went on, the clearer it became that my family was not okay. Mom and Dad barely spoke. Every answer to Grandpa was short. Whenever he asked anything about money or how they were doing, they changed. Subject fast. Their eyes kept flicking to each other. Megan stared at her phone, scrolling like she was trapped in a much more interesting universe than this table. Every now and then they forced a comment, and almost everyone carried a jab aimed at me. "Another year at the mall, huh, Connor?" Megan said in her usual superior tone. "When are you getting a real job?" Mom gave a little laugh in agreement. "Yeah, at your age, you should be a bit more ambitious. You're not planning to sell stuff forever, are you?" My face burned. Wine or shame, I couldn't tell. Right in front of the one person who always believed in me, they still casually dragged me down. Grandpa set his wine glass down and looked straight at them. "Ambitious?" he repeated, voice suddenly lower. This kid's been working since he was 18. While others his age were burning through their parents' money, he built independence with his own hands. To me, that's not just ambition, that's dignity. Silence crashed over the table. Mom and Dad suddenly found the napkin folds fascinating. Megan turned her phone face down and said nothing. Dessert arrived, an exquisitely presented tiramisu, thin dusting of cocoa, one perfect strawberry in the corner. The server announced the price in the calmest voice imaginable, and I quietly calculated how many cafeteria lunches that would buy me. That was the exact moment Grandpa turned to me with the fondest look and asked the one question that ripped everything wide open. By the way, Connor, tell me, how have you been enjoying the gift I got you last year? I blinked. The gift? Last year? Yeah, your birthday present, of course, he smiled. Did you like it? In my head flashed the cheap supermarket cake with crooked icing, the half-hearted singing from the three of them. I forced a smile. Oh, the cake, I said. Thanks, Grandpa. That was really thoughtful of you. The smile on his face vanished like someone had blown it out. He frowned, tilted his head as if the story didn't line up. Cake? He repeated. What cake? The birthday cake from last year, I explained, a cold wave rolling through my stomach. Mom said you called and sent money so they could buy me a cake. Connor, Grandpa said slowly, his eyes shifting straight to my parents. I never told them to buy a cake. The air at the table turned thick as tar. He lowered his voice, but every word landed clear as a bell. I was asking about the car, he said. The car I bought and had delivered on your actual birthday? You never got that car? The world tilted. A car? I could barely hear the jazz anymore. The red Civic, he said, and for the first time that night, the smile was completely gone. Brand new, title in your name, fully paid for. I handled the paperwork myself and arranged delivery straight to your house, on your birthday. It felt like someone had yanked the chair out from under me. I've never seen any cars, Grandpa, I said, my own voice sounding foreign in my ears. Just the cake. Silence answered me. Not the comfortable kind when conversation runs out, but the kind where you can hear your own heartbeat. Mom and Dad went white. Megan stopped breathing, her hand frozen on her phone. Grandpa Edward looked at each of them in turn. I had never seen his eyes like that. Confusion quickly replaced by a cold, razor-sharp anger. Where is that car? He asked, each word dropping like a hammer. Where is the car I bought for my grandson? Patrick spoke first, stammering. Dad, there must be some kind of mix-up. Maybe the transport company. Denise jumped in, voice shaking more than usual. Yes, exactly. I think the delivery had issues, and the paperwork, classes. Everything got messed up. But Edward Walsh was not the kind of man who built a company from nothing, then moved across an ocean to work in his old age, just to be fed flimsy excuses at the end of his life. There is no mix-up, he said, slamming his palm on the table hard enough to make the wine glasses rattle. A few heads turned. I heard whispers around us, but at that moment the entire world was this table. I want the truth, he said, voice low and sharp as a blade. Right now? A server froze a few steps away. Other tables were staring openly now. A couple of phones were already half raised. I didn't care anymore. The only thought in my head was, my grandfather bought me a car, a gift that could have changed my entire life, and I never even knew it existed. Finally, Denise broke. Her shoulders slumped, her voice tiny. We sold the car, she said, each word scraping my ears. Sold it? I nearly shot out of my chair. You sold my car? We needed the money, Patrick cut in, trying to claw back some authority. Times are tough, you know that, and Megan, she needed... Needed what? I snapped, my voice cracking. More designer clothes? Another pair of limited edition sneakers? Another 5-star vacation while I'm pulling doubles at the mall? Grandpa's fists clenched until the knuckles went white. You took the gift I bought specifically for Connor, he said. A car titled in his name so he wouldn't have to drag himself to work on that old bus, and you sold it to pay for Megan's luxuries? Not just Megan's, the mom protested weakly. It was for the whole family. We used it for the trip, for things we all needed. Lies, I shouted. I didn't go on that trip. I never saw a single dollar. Everything, all of it you spent on yourselves. Grandpa stood up so fast his chair tipped back. A server caught it just in time. His face was crimson, but his voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. 32,000, he said, enunciating every syllable. $32,000. That's what the car cost. 32,000 that I scraped. Together, dollar by dollar, working far from home, far from my wife, so I could give my grandson one decent thing. And you sold it like it was junk, traded it for a few weeks of vanity. The number hit me like a fist. 32,000? More than I'd earned in 2 years of killing myself at the mall. And they'd have traded it for a handful of family time Instagram photos. Dad, let us explain. Patrick started timidly. There is no explanation good enough, Grandpa cut him off. You betrayed my trust. You stole from your own son. And I'm damn sure, he stared them down, this wasn't the first time. Then he turned to me. The rage in his eyes softened into a sadness so deep I almost had to look away. Connor, my boy, he said, voice dropping. There's something I have to tell you right now. That car wasn't the only gift I sent you. My heart stopped. What do you mean? I whispered. For the past 3 years, he said slowly, each word hammering into the table, every single month, I've been sending a specific amount for you alone. For your education, for your own needs, so you could have the opportunities you actually deserve, Grandpa continued, his eyes never leaving mine. He leaned back a little, as if he himself were trying to swallow the disappointment. He sent the money to your parents because he trusted they would pass it on to you, that as your parents, they would do the right thing, but now he knows. You never saw a single cent of it. I turned to Patrick and Denise, but it felt like someone had just kicked me square in the chest. Horror and rage surged at the same time, making my voice come out rough and hoarse. How long? I asked, staring at them but directing the question to Grandpa. 3 years, he answered without hesitation. $600 a month, plus an extra amount for living expenses. Everything was clearly addressed to the Walsh family, but that part... He paused, his gaze stabbing into my parents. Was meant for you. My brain did the math automatically. $600 a month for 3 years, over $20,000, plus $32,000 for the red Civic. More than $50,000 total. More than 2 years of my mall salary if I never ate, drank, or lived. You're thieves, I said, my voice so cold it surprised even me. Thieves in your own house. Stealing from your own son. Megan finally found her voice again. She leaned forward, irritation etched across her face. Oh, come on, Connor, she snorted. Stop acting like you're some big victim. That money was to help the whole family. It helped you too. Helped me? I whipped around to face her. Yeah, it helped a lot. It helped you pay for designer dresses, limited edition sneakers, resort check-ins. Meanwhile, I slaved away at the mall and came home to watch you live like royalty on my money. Grandpa placed a hand on my shoulder and squeezed, gently as if to keep me from exploding completely. Connor, he said slowly, you're not staying in that house one more day. He turned to me, eyes so decisive it sent a shiver down my spine. Come with me to Portugal. There, you'll have the chances you were always meant to have. I didn't need to think long. The answer came out before my brain even finished processing. When? Now, he said without missing a beat. Tonight, we finish dinner, pick up your things, head to the airport. Tickets are already booked, just waiting for you to get on the plane. My parents panicked instantly. Denise leaned toward him, voice pitching higher. Dad, you can't be serious, she said, lips trembling. He's our son. Son? Grandpa let out a dry, humorless laugh. You dare use that word? You've treated this boy like a stranger his entire life. You insulted him, bled him dry, looked down on him, sold what was his, and now you pull out the son card like it's a shield. He turned back to me, his voice softening. It's your decision, Connor, he said. You can stay here and keep being their punching bag. Or you can come with me and start the life you only ever let yourself dream about. I looked at each of them. My parents looked desperate, but the desperation in their eyes wasn't fear of losing a son. It was fear of losing the walking wallet named Edward. Megan's face was pale. For the first time, she seemed to realize her princess life was not a birthright. I'm going, I said, standing up. The napkin slid off my lap and hit the floor. There's nothing left for me here. For the first time since everything shattered, Grandpa smiled. It wasn't the carefree grin from earlier. It was the relieved smile of someone who finally saw another person climb out of the rubble. Then let's go, son, he said. Your new life starts right now. We turned and walked away from the table, leaving Patrick, Denise, and Megan sitting stunned beside a bill they'd have to pay themselves for the first time in years, without Grandpa's money to cover it. When we stepped through the restaurant's glass doors into the cool night air, I felt so light I thought I might float. Not because of the food or the wine, but because the truth had finally been spoken to their faces, and I no longer had to play the quiet, obedient victim. Grandpa, I said as we walked to the parking lot, our shoes echoing on the concrete. Thank you for believing in me, even when I sometimes couldn't believe in myself. I always believed, he answered, opening the car door for me. Now you're going to see for yourself what a real family looks like. The flight to Lisbon felt like a dream I would have pinched myself awake from in the past. He'd bought first-class tickets. For the first time in my life, I sat in a seat where my legs didn't hit the one in front, where someone actually asked what I wanted to. Drink, eat, or if I needed a blanket. The whole flight he told me about his new life there, how he started a small consulting firm, began with a few old clients, slowly grew, landed bigger contracts, hired people, opened an office. You'll work with me, he said, eyes shining, not because of favoritism, because you'll learn how to run a real business. You've got a logical mind, you observe well, and you understand people better than they think. That's gold in consulting. When the plane touched down in Lisbon, I looked out the window at red-tiled roofs, winding streets, a city I'd only ever seen on maps now right beneath me. His house was a villa in a quiet neighborhood, with a big garden full of trees and flowers. From the balcony, you could see the whole city sparkling below. I was still taking it in when he dragged me to the garage. Pick one, he said, flipping on the lights. In front of me was a row of cars, a metallic blue BMW gleaming, a matte black Audi, and in the corner, a fire engine red Porsche, its headlights glowing like predator eyes in the dark. I stood frozen for a few seconds. That one, I finally said, pointing at the red Porsche. Grandpa chuckled. Good taste. I knew you'd choose it. Those first days in Lisbon, everything felt wrong in the best possible way. My bedroom was bigger than the entire living room back home. The bed was so huge I could lie sideways and still not reach the edges. The closet was already stocked with tailored clothes I never imagined wearing. But the strangest thing wasn't the stuff. It was the way he treated me. He discussed company decisions with me, asked my opinion on contracts, pricing strategies, marketing campaigns. When I spoke, he didn't interrupt or brush me off. He actually thought about it, nodded, sometimes even said, "That's a good idea, write it down." I started going with him to client meetings, doing the analysis myself, writing reports, standing right behind him during presentations. I worked late into the night, exhausted to the bone, but every time we closed a deal, every time a client nodded because of a suggestion I'd made, it felt like I was finally putting another piece into the complete version of myself. My salary was 10 times what I made standing behind a counter at the mall. For the first time in my life, I had money not just to survive the month, but to actually decide what I wanted to do with it. Money, though, was still secondary. The most important thing was the feeling of belonging. He introduced me to everyone as my grandson Connor, the one who will take over the company when I retire. He said it so naturally, like it was simple fact, and every time he did, the kid who used to shrink into the corner of the Walsh dinner table felt a lump in his throat. For the first few months, my phone kept buzzing with calls from the States. Patrick, Denise, Megan. I let every single one go to voicemail. I had nothing to say to them. People who stole my money, laughed at my efforts, called me a burden, suddenly remembered they had a son the moment Grandpa's cash stopped flowing. Grandpa Edward made it crystal clear. The night after that dinner at the restaurant, he cut off every penny of support. They made their bed, he said, taking a sip of morning coffee. Now let them lie in it. 6 months went by, work got better, I found my rhythm in this new life. One evening, after an incredible day, we'd just closed a huge contract, and he praised me in front of the whole team. My phone rang again. Mom's number. For some reason, I answered this time. Connor, thank God, Denise's voice came through, a mix of exhaustion and panic. Are you okay? We've been so worried about you. I almost laughed. Worried? Now you're worried. I leaned back in my chair, looking out at the lights twinkling across Lisbon. What do you need, Mom? We just want to talk, sweetheart. She tried to soften her voice. You're our family. We miss you so much. The house doesn't feel the same without you. Family, I repeated. The word tasted bitter. Where was that family when I needed someone on my side? Where was it when you sold my car so Megan could go on vacation? When you spent every cent Grandpa sent for me on clothes and trips? Let me explain, she brushed. Things are really bad right now. Without your grandfather's money, everything's falling apart. They're foreclosing on the house next week. This time I did laugh out loud. And that's my problem, how? You're our son, Patrick cut in, the same harsh tone I knew too well. You have a duty to help your family. Duty? I echoed, almost amused. You treated me like garbage my whole life. The second the money ran out, suddenly I'm a duty? I heard Mom choke up on the other end. Please, Connor, she started crying. We know we were wrong, but we're still your family. You can't let your parents end up on the street. You left me on the street my whole life, I said slowly. Now you're just getting the literal version. Patrick snatched the phone. Son, drop the ungrateful attitude right now, he growled. After everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me, I let out a dry laugh. What exactly have you done besides the bare minimum any parent is supposed to do? You fed me, but gave Megan 10 times more. You gave me a bed, but never a sense of belonging. Then you stole over 50 grand that was meant for me, sold my car, humiliated me, treated me like a burden, and now you stand there talking about gratitude? I heard frantic breathing on the line, then a third voice. You're blowing this way out of proportion, Connor, Megan said, still with that spoiled tone I knew by heart. It wasn't that bad. You're being dramatic. Not that bad, I smirked. You used my money to buy designer, clothes, go on trips, mocked me every day for my job, then left me home alone while you checked in from Bali, Malibu, wherever. But look at you now, she shot back. You live in a villa, drive a Porsche, work with Grandpa. You don't need to hold grudges anymore. I have been fine without you, not because of you. And you know what? I think you deserve to suffer a little. Finally, you're paying the price for always acting like the victim. Mom grabbed the phone again, practically shouting. Connor, please, we're family. You abandoned me first, I answered. The only difference now is I get to choose, and I choose to have nothing to do with you. But we're your parents, she sobbed. Biological doesn't mean parent, I said, my voice no longer shaking. Real parents don't steal from their kid. Don't use him as a punching bag to lift another child up. Don't sell his future for a few expensive handbags. Silence stretched on the line for a long time. Then Mom asked, desperate, like a last gasp, What if we apologize? What if we beg for forgiveness? Forgiveness doesn't erase the years I lived like a ghost, I said. It doesn't give back the money you stole. It doesn't erase every time you looked at me like I was a burden, every time I was compared to Megan. So you're really going to leave us on the street? Her voice broke. I'm not putting you on the street, I replied. Your choices did that. You could have used Grandpa's money honestly and taken care of both your kids. You could have treated me like family instead of an ATM. You chose humiliation and theft. Now own it. Patrick tried one last card. What about Megan? He lowered his voice. She doesn't deserve to be dragged into this. She shouldn't have to pay for everything. She doesn't, I laughed coldly. She joined in every single time you humiliated me. She laughed the loudest when you put me down. She lived happily off every cent that was mine. She's not a victim. She's an accomplice. But she's your sister. Sister, I repeated. The word felt like a broken chair. A sister stands beside you, not on top of you to climb higher. Megan was never my sister. She was just a stranger who shared an address. I heard Megan scream in the background, pure venom. I always hated you anyway. You always made everything heavy. You really were this family's burden. Perfect, I said, surprisingly calm. Finally, the truth comes out. Thanks for confirming what I've known for years. Mom took the phone again, openly sobbing. Connor, please, she begged. Give us at least one chance to make it right. You had 23 years of chances, I said. You burned every single one. Only when the money ran out did you realize you were wrong. I paused, letting the heavy silence settle on their end. You know what actually hurts the most? Continued. It's not the money, really. What hurts the most is that through all those years, you never actually loved me. I was just an inconvenience you had to tolerate. And now, when you need something from me, you want to play the loving parent act. 4 words came through the line, words I used to dream of hearing, that now just sounded empty. We love you, Mom said. No, I answered in my head, my parents never loved me. They just loved the idea of what I could do for them now. They loved the walking wallet they thought they could still control. Those are 2 completely different things. I said it out loud, my voice so calm it even surprised me. You love the fact that I have money now, not the fact that I exist. Then I hung up, switched the phone to silent, and deleted the call like I was clearing a spam notification. I was done listening to any more whining, guilt-tripping, or acting. Grandpa Edward was standing in the doorway. He'd clearly heard part of the conversation. He didn't rush to ask questions. He just walked over and placed his old but steady hand on my shoulder. How do you feel? He asked quietly. I took a deep breath and looked out at the balcony where Lisbon was starting to light up. Free, I said. And that was the real feeling. For the first time in my life, I wasn't tied to that invisible rope called family obligation that had really just been an excuse for them to bleed me dry. A few weeks later, once everything had settled inside my head, Grandpa started telling me in more detail what was happening across the ocean in that old town back in the States. My parents had been evicted from the house they used to brag about as their warm home. Now they were crammed into a tiny apartment in a rough neighborhood with walls so thin you could hear the neighbors screaming at each other. My father, the man who once called my job menial, was working factory shifts for minimum wage. My mother cleaned houses for strangers, carrying buckets, on her knees, scrubbing floors for spare change. And Megan, the princess who had never worked a day in her life, now stood behind a coffee shop counter in an apron, smiling at customers for tips. Grandpa said they were paying the price for years of arrogance. They always thought they were better than everyone else, that they deserved a lavish life without ever truly earning it. I didn't feel pity. What I felt most clearly was a quiet satisfaction, not the vicious kind that delights in someone else's pain, but the calm certainty that justice had finally turned in the right direction. My new life in Portugal, on the other hand, just kept blooming. Grandpa taught me everything about business, how to read financial reports, how to read a client's face and know which words to use. I discovered I actually had talent. The traits they used to call annoying, being meticulous, analytical, always asking questions, turned out to be strengths sparsa in this world. Within a year, I was managing several major clients, contracts I used to only hear about on TV. Revenue climbed, the company's reputation soared. I met fascinating people and made friends. I didn't have to pretend to be nice and harmless around to be accepted. Then I started dating Sophia, a colleague who always looked me straight in the eye when she spoke and never made me feel like I was taking up too much space. You're special, Connor, she'd say firmly, not as empty flattery. You have an inner strength most people don't. Anyone else would have broken a long time ago. Sometimes late at night, I told her about my childhood, how my parents always put Megan on a pedestal and kicked me into the dirt, the car that was sold, the more than 50 grand that vanished. Every time Sophia looked at me like she couldn't believe it. How could parents treat their own child like that? She'd shake her head. If I ever have a kid, just imagining someone doing that to them would drive me insane. Because to them, I was never really a son, I explained. I was an accident they tolerated, until they realized they could squeeze something out of me. 2 years after I walked out of the Walsh house, another call found me. Unknown number. I hesitated a few seconds before answering. "Connor, it's Mom. Please don't hang up," Denise's voice came through, hoarse and trembling. I frowned. "How did you get this number?" "I asked someone to look it up," she admitted. "Connor, please, I need to talk to you about something important." For some reason, I didn't hang up right away. I stayed silent and waited. "Megan is sick," she said. "Cancer. She needs treatment fast, and we don't have the money. She could die." My chest tightened for a second. Not from pity or grief, but from the old anger knocking on the door of memory. "And that has what to do with me?" I asked, my voice frighteningly calm. "She's your sister," Mom answered instantly. "No matter what happened, she's still family. You can't just turn your back." "No," I said. "She isn't." I remembered every time she laughed when I was scolded, every time she called me a failure, a parasite, the shadow that ruined the family photo. "She had 20-something years to be my sister," I said. "She chose not to. She chose to insult me, to side with you every time you crushed me. Now that she needs help, she suddenly remembers she has a brother?" "Connor, she's sorry," Mom rushed. "She wants to talk to you." "I don't care," I replied. "How can you be so cold?" she started crying. "This is life or death." "You had an entire lifetime to not be cold to me," I said. "Where were you when I needed someone to defend me? Where were you when I fell? Now that you're panicking, you want me to forget everything?" "But we're family." "Family," I cut her off. "Family is there in good times and bad. Family supports, loves, respects you, not laughs in your face and then steals everything your grandfather sent you. You were never family to me. You were just people who shared an address." Sobbing filled the line. "Connor, I know we were wrong. Everyone makes mistakes, but please, don't let your sister die." "She's not my sister," I repeated. "And even if she were, you taught me the lesson yourselves. Family doesn't help family. When I needed you, where were you?" I hung up. This time definitively, no crack left for guilt to slip through. I blocked that number and every other one that ever came from the States afterward. 3 more years passed. My life in Portugal just kept growing. Sophia and I got married in a small ceremony by the Tagus River, with Grandpa Edward as ring bearer, eyes red but smiling wider than ever. We bought a beautiful house in central Lisbon, with a sunny balcony where we drink coffee in the mornings and watch the city wake up. I became a full partner in the company he built. My name sits right beside his on the paperwork. We're comfortable, respected, and above all, at peace. One quiet Sunday afternoon while I was making coffee, Grandpa called me into his study. "Connor, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice heavier than usual. "Last night I got a call from the States." My stomach instinctively tightened, even though it had been years since I'd had any contact. "Megan passed away last week," he said simply. "Cancer. She didn't make it." I stood frozen for a few seconds, but then nothing came. No pain, no joy, no relief. Just a mild, flat emptiness, like a lake with no wind. "How are they?" I asked, just to break the silence. "Broken," he answered. "Your father had a heart attack after the funeral. He's in the hospital. Your mother's alone, pretty much has nothing left. No money, no decent home, no one to lean on." I was quiet for a long time. "Do you feel anything?" he asked gently. "No," I answered honestly. "Should I?" "There's no right or wrong here, Connor." He shook his head. "They made their choices. You made yours. Everyone is living with the consequences." "They could have had a stable life," I said, looking down at my hands, the fingers that once stocked shelves for hours on end. "If they had treated me like family, if they had used the money you sent wisely, if they had taken the chance to build a real family instead of a stage for humiliation and favoritism." He nodded. "And now they're living with what they planted." "I don't feel regret," I said slowly. "I feel everything has finally settled where it belongs." That night, I told Sophia the whole story. The call begging for treatment money, the news of Megan's death. She held me tight while I talked until my voice gave out. You did right by yourself, she said. Family isn't the people who share your DNA. Family is the people who love you, respect you, stand by you. Grandpa Edward is your family. I'm your family. She was right. I looked around at the warm, bright house, my wife resting her head on my shoulder, Grandpa watching soccer in the living room, the company we'd built together, colleagues who value my opinion. I realized I finally had what I thought was only a fantasy in my childhood. A real family. People who see me as a person, not just a wallet or a shadow. Every now and then afterward, my mother still tried to reach me. Emails, unknown numbers, messages through mutual acquaintances. Each time with a new tragedy, another reason to beg for help. I never replied. That chapter was closed, locked and dead, and shelved like an old book I'd already finished reading. Today, at 28, I can look in the mirror and say, I'm a satisfied man. I have a job I'm good at and love, a family chosen by hearts instead of blood, friends I don't have to buy with my self-respect. I learned one expensive but priceless lesson. Sometimes finding happiness means having the courage to walk away from toxic people, even when the paperwork calls them relatives. Grandpa Edward saved me, not just with money, but by showing me what real love feels like. What it's like to have someone proud to say your name. What it's like to sit at a table without shrinking yourself to fit. My biological family is reaping exactly what they sowed. For years, they planted contempt, selfishness, flattery for one child, and humiliation for the other. Now they're harvesting loneliness, poverty, and regret. I don't regret turning my back. I'm grateful to myself for having the strength to walk away. I built my life on mutual respect and love, not on late apologies. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do for yourself is let go of people who don't deserve you, even if they share your last name. Because real family is something you choose, not an obligation you carry. And I chose right. And that's where our story comes to an end. Thank you all for joining me and listening all the way through on Reddit Request Stories. If you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to hit that like button, share it with others, and drop a comment below. Your support gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more gripping stories. Wishing you all some truly relaxing and enjoyable moments with the stories on this channel. See you in the next one.